Aye, come closer to the fire, friend. The night is calm, the sea is only a memory here on land, and my bones are old enough now that I don't mind sitting a while and telling a story. You wanted to know what it was like, life on the open sea, in the age when the world itself still felt large enough to swallow you whole. So let me take you back with me, slowly, gently, the way a tide carries driftwood. I wasn't always a sailor. No man is born knowing the ropes, the sails, the stars. I grew up in a little port town, nothing worth naming now, a place of gull cries, tar-stained docks and streets that always smelled of salt and fish guts. My father gutted cod for a living. My mother washed clothes for the merchant families. I wasn't meant for anything grand. But the sea, the sea called to me even when I was too small to stand steady on the shore. I remember sitting on the rocks as a boy, watching the ships come in with their sails swollen like the bellies of great beasts. Sailors shouted, ropes flew, gulls screamed above the masts, and every time the gangplank was lowered, the men walked off looking older, browner, tired, but alive in a way I'd never seen in anyone else, as if they carried stories under their skin, as if they had seen the world open itself before them like a map drawn in starlight. I wanted that feeling for myself, so at 16, when boys think they're men but aren't yet hardened by disappointment, I signed onto a ship. Not one of the great royal expeditions, mind you. No, just a stout merchant carrack with weather-beaten timbers and sails patched so many times they looked like quilts. But to me she was a gateway to everything beyond the horizon. Her name was Santa Maria, old, stubborn, creaking with every wave like a grandmother complaining about her joints. But she was strong, a good ship to learn on. The first thing you notice when you join a crew isn't the sea itself, but the smell. Tar, hemp rope, sweat, old fish, damp wood, and the faint bite of the open water. It settles into your clothes, your skin, your hair. After a few weeks you stop noticing it, or maybe you become part of it, as if the ocean is trying to claim you piece by piece. Life aboard, well, it wasn't grand nor gentle. We slept in hammocks strung so close together that if your neighbour rolled over, you rolled with him whether you liked it or not. At night the ship groaned, the ropes creaked, and the waves slapped at the hull in a rhythm that either soothed you into sleep or kept you awake counting each crash like a heartbeat. But let me tell you, friend, waking on a ship at sea is unlike waking anywhere else. There's no quiet dawn. The world is moving before you open your eyes. The deck sways beneath your feet, the wind hums through the rigging, and the sky... the sky is so wide it makes you feel smaller than a grain of sand. Food was simple, hardtack hard enough to break a tooth, salted pork so tough you had to soak it in water, dried peas, stale ale that tasted like it regretted being born. On good days, when we were close to land, we'd catch fish, mackerel, sometimes tuna, or if luck was with us, a sea bass big enough to feed the whole crew. Nothing tasted sweeter than a meal that hadn't been salted for months. And water. Fresh water was worth more than gold. We guarded it like treasure. Barrels spoiled easily, turning sour. Sometimes the whole ship would gather to tilt back their heads and let rain pour into their mouths. Imagine that. Grown, hardened men laughing like children because the sky had given them a drink. As for the work, it filled every hour. Coiling ropes, patching sails, cleaning the deck, storing cargo, checking barrels, inspecting the hull, scraping barnacles, scrubbing every bit of the ship until it shone. Any sailor who stood idle would be reminded, loudly, that the sea punishes laziness faster than any captain. But the hardest work, the soul-shaking kind, came during storms. Now you might think you've seen a storm where you come from. Rain, thunder, a bit of wind. But a storm at sea, that is a different beast entirely. It rises from nowhere, like a giant waking from the deep. One moment the sea is calm, the next it lifts your ship like a child's toy. The masts groan, the sails snap like whips, and the deck tilts so sharply you can feel the ocean reaching for you. I remember my first storm. The sky went black, the waves climbed higher than the house I grew up in, and the wind screamed through the ropes like voices of the dead. Men clung to anything they could grip. The captain shouted orders, though half of them were lost in the roar. Water crashed over the deck, washing barrels away, soaking every rope. We tied ourselves to the railing so we wouldn't be flung into the sea. Lightning split the sky in jagged lines, lighting the world for a heartbeat before plunging us back into darkness. And through it all the ship fought, groaning, shuddering, but refusing to break. When dawn finally came, weak and watery, half the crew could barely stand. But we were alive, and that feeling, surviving the ocean's fury, changes a man. It teaches you respect, humility, and a strange quiet love for the very thing that nearly killed you. But not every day was storm and struggle. No, there were nights that felt carved from heaven itself. Picture this: the deck dry and warm beneath you, the sea calm as glass, the stars above brighter than any lantern, a breeze soft as a whispered promise, the ship sliding across the water so smoothly you forget the world is even moving. On nights like that, we'd sit near the bow, sharing quiet talk or simple silence. Someone might hum a tune, someone else would mend a shirt by lantern light, and I would lean against the rail, staring out at the endless black water sparkling with moonlight, feeling as though the sea was breathing with us. Out there, far from land, with nothing but sky above and mystery below, a man feels both tiny and infinite at the same time. But I'm getting ahead of myself. That's only the beginning, the first taste of life at sea. There's more to tell, much more. The ports we visited, the strange lands, the dangers, the wonders, and the things a sailor sees that no map can capture. Aye, settle in closer to the fire, friend. The wind's died down, and the night's grown soft enough for old memories to wake. You asked what life was really like out there, far past the horizon, so far that the world felt like it wasn't made of land and water anymore, but just sky, wind, and whatever courage a man could scrape together. Well then, let me take you back. Not to storms or monsters yet. No, we'll get to those in time. Let me take you to something smaller, quieter, the kind of moment only a sailor knows. Because the sea isn't all fury and thunder. Most of the time it's slow, gentle, almost shy. And the memories that stay with me most stubbornly are the quiet ones. You see, after weeks at sea, a ship becomes its own little world. A floating village, if you like. Every man on board knows everyone else's footsteps, breathing, habits, curses, jokes and fears. In a way, it's like living inside a single heartbeat. Everything moves together. Everything depends on everything else. And in those long stretches of calm weather, life found a rhythm. Slow and steady like the roll of the waves. You'd wake up before the sun most days. The air would still be cooler than you'd think, even under tropical skies, and you'd step out onto the deck with the boards cold under your bare feet. Someone would already be up ahead of you, usually the cook or the man on dawn watch. Sometimes you'd hear humming from the bow, or the scrape of a bucket being pulled up on a rope, or just the sea brushing along the hull like silk. And above you, always above you, the sails would loom in the dim light. Great pale wings waiting to catch the world awake. That was my favourite time of day, if I'm being honest. Before the shouting, before the heat, before the work. The horizon would glow faintly, soft red at first, then gold, and you'd feel like the world was being born again right in front of you. The ocean looked like a smooth piece of glass stretching forever, and the only sound was the gentle sway of the ship. Sometimes, if the water was clear enough, you'd see shadows beneath the surface, big ones, manta rays drifting like ghosts, or schools of silver fish swirling in slow circles. It made you feel very small, but in a good way, like you were part of something deeper. Breakfast wasn't much hardtack, salted fish, maybe a spoon of dried fruit if the quartermaster was in a generous mood. But we didn't complain. A sailor who complains too much gets on everyone's nerves, and you don't want that when you're trapped with 50 other souls and nowhere to run. A ship's deck is no place for grudges. They fester. After breakfast came the day's work. Patching canvas, scrubbing the deck, hauling lines, checking ropes for wear, adjusting rigging, mending nets. Always something. The sea might seem calm, but a ship never rests. She always wants something from you. And if you don't give it to her, well, she'll remind you who really holds your life in her hands. A frayed rope can snap like a whip. A loose plank can break underfoot. A misjudged knot can bring down a whole yard of sail onto your head. You learn respect out there, or you don't come home. Is it strange to say that I liked the work? There was something peaceful about it. Rope between your fingers, salt in your hair, the air warm and full of sun. You'd hear gulls crying overhead when we sailed near land, or nothing but wind when we were weeks out. And every man, whether he admitted it or not, worked to keep his thoughts still. Because when you're surrounded by water on all sides, your mind can start wandering to dangerous places. So you focus on knots and wood grain, on clean lines and tight sails, the small things that keep a ship alive. Around midday the sun would be fierce, especially near the equator. The deck would get so hot you could fry fish on it, or at least that's what we joked. Shirts came off, bandanas went on, and the air shimmered like the whole world was a giant bonfire. Some men got burned deep red within hours. I was lucky brown as an old rope after the first year, but even then the heat drained you quick. We'd take turns going below to gulp water or rest for a moment in the dim shade. Down there it smelled like damp wood, sweat, tar and salt. Sounds awful, I know, but after weeks at sea it becomes the smell of home. Sometimes the captain would come down during these hours. He'd sit at the little table in his cabin, charts spread out in front of him, compass glinting, quill tapping lightly. I used to watch him from the doorway when I was younger, before I'd learned the craft myself. I admired him, I suppose. The responsibility he carried. Every line on those charts meant danger or safety for all of us. Every change in wind, every shift of the clouds. It was like the sea whispered secrets only he could hear. But even he had gentle moments. I remember once warm, clear day, the ocean smooth as polished stone. He let us stop work early. Said it was good for the soul to rest now and then. We tossed scraps into the water and watched fish dart up to snatch them. A whale surfaced not far from us, its great back rising like a dark island, then slipping under again with barely a sound. The whole crew went quiet. Even the loudest among us knew better than to ruin a moment like that. For a little while, the sea felt like a cathedral. Evenings were my second favourite time of day. The sky would turn soft purple and pink, the air greenish near the water, and the heat would slip away. Someone would start humming a tune, another would join, and before long the whole deck filled with low-voiced songs, old ones, the kind that stay alive for centuries because they hold something true. Work slowed, the sea calmed, and the ship seemed to breathe easier, like she herself was settling in for the night. And when darkness finally folded over us, the sky lit up in ways you'd never believe from land. Stars so bright they looked like silver dust scattered across black velvet. The Milky Way band stretching clear from one horizon to the other. Sometimes shooting stars would streak by, one after another, as if the heavens were telling stories of their own. And there we were, just 50 tired men on a wooden deck floating in the middle of all that wonder. It was then, in those quiet nights, that loneliness crept in. Not a bad loneliness, mind you, more like a soft ache, a reminder of everything you left behind. Family, home, a warm bed that didn't move, voices you loved. You'd lie on the deck with your hands behind your head and think of them. And somehow, even with the endless sea around you, you felt a little closer. Those were the good days, the peaceful days, and they mattered, because they were the calm before the storms, the real storms that tested you in ways only the ocean can. Aye. Lean in, friend. The fire's settled low, and the night's settled deep. This is the perfect hour for the tale that comes next, because the sea, for all her calm days and gentle mornings, has another face entirely, a darker one. But don't tense up, not yet. I won't throw you straight into terror. A good sailor eases into a storm the way he eases into a cold bath, slowly, letting the water creep up inch by inch. Before the real tempest there are signs, small ones, quiet ones, that only those who've lived long on the water can read, and if you sit still a moment, I'll walk you through them. Because out there, far beyond any shore, a man learns to see danger the way a shepherd knows his flock. Every shift in wind, every strange bird, every breath of the ocean tells a story. The first sign is the silence. You're standing on deck, the midday sun bright, the sea calm, but the world feels muffled somehow, as if someone's thrown a huge woolen blanket over the sky. No gulls, no creaking of ropes, even the waves seem to swell in total hush. A few of the younger men wouldn't notice, too busy working or daydreaming, but the older crew would pause, eyes narrowed, hands resting on the rail like they were trying to feel the sea's heartbeat. Then comes the second sign. The wind, which had been warm and easy all morning, suddenly shifts. Not a violent shift, not something that would make anyone shout, but a little twist, a slightly different smell in the air, colder, heavy, like the scent right before fresh rain, except thicker, more metallic. Almost like iron. It settles on your tongue in a way that makes you swallow without thinking. That's when the boatswain big man with a voice like rolling thunder would shout, "All hands prepare for weather." And even if the sky above us was still bright blue, every man aboard knew what that meant. A storm was coming. Whether gentle or monstrous, no one could say yet. But the sea had whispered it, and the sea never whispers without reason. We'd haul lines, double-check knots, secure barrels, reinforce hatches. The ship would become a hive of controlled urgency. Everyone moved with purpose. Even the cook would strap down his pots and kettles so they wouldn't turn into flying iron missiles when the waves started tossing us like driftwood. I remember one storm in particular, the kind that stays carved into a man's bones long after his hair has gone grey. We'd been sailing for weeks across open ocean, no land in sight. Morale was good, food was holding steady, and the wind had been kind to us. Too kind, perhaps. We'd gotten comfortable, relaxed. It was late afternoon when the first real warning showed itself. A wall. A solid dark blue wall rising in the distance. Not of stone, not of land of clouds. Towering thunderheads stacked atop one another like mountains, swallowing the horizon. And they were moving toward us. You may think clouds move slow. Not these. These rolled like charging beasts. And when the sun hit them just right, the tops glowed gold while the bottoms smouldered black as ink. I've never seen anything so beautiful and so terrifying at the same time. The captain appeared on deck, not walking, not shouting, just there, as if the storm itself had summoned him. I've seen commanders freeze in the face of weather like that, but not ours. He stood steady, one hand on the rail, eyes fixed on the horizon with a calm so deep it quieted the panic beginning to rise in the crew. He said two simple words, "Reef sails," and we moved. You've never seen speed until you've seen sailors racing a storm. Men climbed the mast like spiders, hands flying over ropes with a skill that comes only from living your life at sea. Canvas came down, lines tightened, every loose item was tied, every hatch sealed. And all the while the world around us darkened. The golden light vanished. The temperature dropped so fast we felt it through our clothes. Even the ocean changed colour from a soft blue to a hard, glassy green. And then the wind hit. Not a gust, not a breeze, a force. It slammed into the ship like a giant's fist. The whole deck lurched. Barrels groaned in their ropes. A couple of the younger sailors lost their footing and slid across the boards, cursing loud enough to make even the ocean blush. The mast creaked like old bones, but the ship held. She was a good vessel, strong, well-built, cared for by hands that respected her. For a long moment, everything was chaos. Wind screaming, waves rising, lines snapping taut with sounds like pistol shots. The rain followed almost instantly, pouring down in sheets so thick you could barely see the man standing beside you. But let me tell you something strange. Once you accept that the storm has you, once you realise you can do nothing except trust your crew, your captain, and the ship beneath your feet, something peaceful settles in. It sounds mad, I know, but it's true. In the heart of a storm, a sailor becomes calm, focused, almost still. Lightning tore through the sky, illuminating everything in shattered white. Thunder rolled like cannon fire. The ship bucked and groaned under the pressure of waves taller than houses. Water crashed over the rails, soaking us to the bone, blinding us, knocking the breath from our lungs. But not a single man abandoned his post. We worked like gears in a clock-tight, precise wordless. One man held a line that kept the mainsail from tearing free. Another kept the helm steady with both hands locked around it, muscles trembling, knuckles white. Someone else bailed water from the deck, though it felt like trying to empty the whole sea with a wooden cup. Some storms last minutes. This one lasted hours. The kind of hours that feel like entire lifetimes. You lose all sense of time, all sense of day or night. The world becomes nothing but water, motion, noise, darkness. And inside all of that, your mind goes oddly quiet. You stop thinking of home, of fear, of anything except the next task, and the next, and the next. When the storm finally began to ease, it didn't stop suddenly. No, it softened, like a monster growing tired. The wind calmed first, dropping from a roar to a heavy breath. Then the rain thinned. Then the waves settled enough that the deck no longer felt like it was trying to buck us into the air, and slowly light began to return. The clouds thinned, a pale glow seeped through, and then the sun broke out in a single golden beam, lighting the wet deck until it sparkled like the whole ship had been dipped in gold. We looked around, exhausted, waterlogged, barely standing, but alive. A few men laughed dry, shaky laughs of disbelief. Others just leaned against whatever they could reach, eyes half shut. One sailor kissed the mast, another patted the deck like it was a loyal dog. I just breathed, deep, grateful breaths. The air after a storm smells different, clean, sharp, filled with something like hope. And that evening, once we'd checked the damage, counted supplies, and thanked whatever saints were listening, we sat together on the deck in silence. No songs, no stories, just quiet companionship under a clear sky. Storms change a man, friend. Not in the ways people think, not by scaring him, but by teaching him, reminding him that life is held together by small things, knots, ropes, teamwork, trust, and that the sea, like fate, can take everything from you in a heartbeat. But she can also give back calm, stars, peace. And nights like this one, warm and gentle, with only memories stirring. Aye, you're still awake. Good. The fire has burned low, the shadows dance softer now, and this is a fine hour for the next piece of the tale. You've heard about the storms, at least one of them, but life at sea wasn't only danger, nor was it only peace. It was something in between. A long stretch of days where a man learned more about himself than he ever expected to. Now let me take you into those quiet stretches, the weeks where nothing seemed to happen, but somehow everything happened at once. Because on land, when nothing happens, the days pass by without a thought. But on the ocean, when the winds fail and the world goes still, that's when a sailor begins to hear the loudest conversations of his life conversations with himself. I remember one voyage, long and uneventful. After the storm I told you about, we expected trouble. More wind, more waves, more punishment. But instead, the world grew strangely gentle, too gentle. The sea flattened into something like polished stone. The sky turned a pale, empty blue, with no sign of cloud or bird, and the wind, our lifeblood, just left us. There's a name for that. The doldrums, a place where the ocean holds its breath, and everything is suspended, as if the world forgot to turn for a while. At first, we didn't mind. After the storm, the calm felt like a blessing. We laid out clothes to dry. We repaired torn ropes. We cleaned the deck from bow to stern. The cook made the closest thing to a feast we could manage with salted meat and dried peas. Men laughed, joked, played dice. Some even sat with their feet hanging off the side, toes nearly touching the motionless water. But calm seas have a trick to them. They lull you, then they trap you. One day passed, then two, then three, and not a breath of wind, not one ripple in the sails. The ocean wasn't just calm, it was dead still, so still that when you looked down, you'd see your face staring back at you as if from a liquid mirror, and deeper still, if you looked long enough, you'd see shapes drifting under the surface. Slow shapes, dark shapes, things too large to name. Talking grew quieter, laughter faded. Men didn't like looking into that water too long. It felt like it was looking back. By the sixth day, the heat became a kind of punishment. Not the bright burning heat we were used to, but a heavy, suffocating heat that pressed on your chest like invisible hands. The air didn't move, not even a whisper. Sweat didn't dry, shirts stuck to skin, tempers shortened. We rationed water, not because we were out, but because we feared we might become stuck there for weeks. Some ships had. Stories ran through every sailor's blood of expeditions lost in the doldrums, drifting helplessly until the men went mad, or worse. We tried everything to coax the wind back. Some sailors swore by singing, others prayed. One fellow hung a tiny wooden charm shaped like a gull from the rigging, said it would tempt the sky to give us its breath again. The captain didn't object. He knew as well as anyone that out there a sailor clings to any superstition that keeps hope alive. But hope grows thin when days blend together. The ocean turned eerie, too still. Even fish avoided us, as if they sensed something we didn't. At night, the water glowed with pale blue sparks, phosphorescence. Natural enough, but haunting when the sea was so still it seemed unnatural. And when we dropped a bucket or rope into the water, the splash echoed, as if the ocean were a vast empty cavern. Around the 10th day we lost count truly. We began to feel the weight of silence, not a peaceful silence, a hollow one, a silence that made even the strongest among us stare at the horizon until his vision blurred. And that's when the mind starts its games. You see, when there's wind or storm or work, you don't have time to think too much. Your hands stay busy, your mind stays sharp. But in the doldrums, your thoughts have nothing to fight against. They grow roots, they tangle, they pull. Men began speaking of home more than usual. Wistful, quiet stories whispered under their breath. Wives, children, cottages, gardens, the smell of fresh bread. Not loudly, never loudly. Saying these things aloud made the longing worse. One young sailor, we called him Finch, thin boy with a sharp nose and a nervous laugh, counted the hours by carving notches on a scrap of plank. One morning he carved 2 notches instead of 1. Didn't realise until evening. He collapsed into trembling laughter, then tears. The boatswain had to carry him below deck until he calmed. Another man, Hobbs, tall, broad, quiet, claimed he heard music coming from the sea during the night. Not human music, he said, voice low, something deep, something old. We told him he was tired. He insisted he wasn't. I'll admit something to you I've never admitted to another soul. One night, standing alone on deck, I thought I heard it too. A low sound, a hum, a vibration more than a noise, rising from the water beneath us as if the sea were speaking in tones too ancient for human tongues. I leaned over the rail, staring into the black glass surface, and the longer I stared, the more I felt as though I were falling. Not physically, but inward, into a space so vast it made the night sky look small. I stepped back fast. Superstitions keep sailors alive, friend, and the sea in the doldrums becomes something that should not be stared at too long. But do not fear, this tale isn't a hopeless one, because after days upon days of stillness, the world moved again. It began at dusk, a tiny ripple, so small most men didn't notice, but I felt it, through the boards, through the soles of my feet, a tremor, a shifting, like the ocean sighing after holding its breath for too long. Then a whisper of wind brushed my cheek. A whisper, nothing more. But after so long without it, it felt like the sweetest touch in the world. I closed my eyes. There it was again, slightly stronger. I shouted. Others ran to the deck. The captain emerged like a ghost from the companionway, eyes sharp. Sails trembled. Lines perked like they were waking. We all stood silent, waiting, holding breath. And then, at last, like a great beast awakening, the wind returned. Not violently, not suddenly, but steadily, slowly, beautifully. The sails swelled, the ship leaned, and the ocean, that flat dead mirror, broke into living waves once more. You've never heard joy until you've heard 50 sailors cheering as if they've been reborn. Some cried, some laughed, some dropped to their knees and thanked every saint by name. Even the captain, usually stern as carved oak, allowed himself the faintest smile. We were alive again. The world moved again, and the ship sailed forward into a breeze that felt like grace itself. A man never forgets the doldrums. They teach you patience and humility more than anything. They teach you that the sea's greatest power isn't fury, it's silence. But we didn't escape all dangers. Oh no, not even close. For the sea holds more than storms and stillness. It holds mysteries, creatures, islands that appear and vanish, lights in the deep, whispers in the night. And more than once we found ourselves facing things that no map could warn us about. You're still with me, good. Nights like this are made for long stories, and the sea, well, she always provides enough stories to last several lifetimes. We've spoken of storms and silence, but now I'll tell you of something stranger. Something that lives between the two, those odd, wandering moments at sea when the world feels slightly off, as though you've stepped into a dream without noticing. Let me take you to one of those moments. It was not long after we'd escaped the doldrums. The wind had returned, the crew had regained some cheer, and the ship cut through the water with renewed purpose. We felt alive again, grateful, light-hearted, almost giddy. The days were warm, and the nights were clear. Dolphins raced the bow. The sea sparkled like scattered gemstones when the sun hit just right. For a brief time, everything felt safe, and that's usually when the strange things begin. One evening, the sky was painted in soft gold and lavender. The wind was steady, the waves gentle. A perfect night. The sort of night that makes even the saltiest old sailor feel a touch poetic. I was on deck helping coil some line when Finch, the nervous young sailor I mentioned before, came rushing toward us. His eyes were wide, not frightened exactly, but unsettled. "Come look," he whispered. Not shouted, whispered, like he was afraid the ocean might hear. We followed him to the starboard rail. He pointed outward, down toward the water, his hand trembling. At first I saw nothing, just waves rolling alongside us. Then I noticed it. A glow, faint at first, pale blue, just beneath the surface. It flickered, then steadied. Not lightning too soft, not moonlight too early in the evening. It was something else, something alive. A long shape drifted alongside our hull, just under the water, too long to be a fish, too smooth to be wreckage. It glowed softly, like a lantern wrapped in seawater. "Bioluminescence," one of the crew muttered, trying to sound confident. "Plankton. Jellyfish. But plankton don't move with purpose. Jellyfish don't keep pace with a ship, and this thing did. It glided beside us like a companion." More men gathered, whispering, leaning over the rail. The captain eventually stepped out of his cabin, irritation written all over him until he saw the light. Then he went silent like the rest of us. The glowing shape shifted closer, and as it did, another shape appeared. Then another, and another. Soon, dozens of them surrounded us. Long pale forms drifting beneath the waves, glowing like underwater stars. They didn't act like predators. They didn't swarm or dart. They simply moved with us, as if escorting us across their territory. The crew was torn between awe and fear. Some men began muttering prayers. Others stared wide-eyed. A few touched the rail as though trying to absorb the moment. Then Hobbs, the quiet, thoughtful sailor, said in a low voice, "They're guiding us." The captain shot him a sharp look, but to be honest, I felt the same. There was something intentional about the way the glowing creatures kept pace, something intelligent. I don't know how long we sailed with them. 10 minutes? An hour? Time felt thin and flexible. The air tasted different, cleaner somehow. Lighter. It felt like breathing inside a dream. And then, just as silently as they'd arrived, the glowing shapes peeled away, one by one, drifting into the deep until the sea swallowed their light. The night after that felt darker than usual. The crew talked about it for days. Some men claimed the lights were good omens, guiding spirits of the deep. Others believed them to be warnings. A few insisted they weren't creatures at all, but reflections of something above the clouds. No one truly knew, but I'll tell you this. I've sailed many oceans, survived storms that split ships in half, faced hunger, thirst, and sickness, and still, nothing has haunted me quite like those quiet blue lights in the deep. Strange moments like that were rare, but not unheard of, and the sea, once she gives you one oddity, tends to give you more. A week later, at dawn, we sighted something else unusual. "Land ho!" shouted the lookout. But it wasn't land, not really. As the sun rose, the shape ahead became clearer. Not a continent, not an island, but a cluster of enormous floating trees. Entire trunks tangled together, drifting in the middle of nowhere. Roots twisted into roots, branches wrapped in vines. Some trunks were half carved by old axe marks, others were smooth as river stones. We slowed the ship to navigate around them. The cluster was vast, bigger than any village I'd ever seen. Birds nested in the branches, though the nearest shore was countless miles away. Strange insects buzzed above the leaves. The whole floating forest creaked and groaned as the waves shifted it, and inside that tangled mass of roots and wood, we heard singing, light, airy, wordless, a melody carried by the breeze. Every man on deck froze. Finch crossed himself. Hobbs squinted into the drifting wood, jaw clenched. Even the captain hesitated. I won't claim it was human. I won't claim it was spirit. The sea is older than any of us, friend, and she holds songs from ages long forgotten. The sound drifted from the heart of those floating trees, soft, gentle, almost playful. the kind of tune you might hum while braiding rope or tending a garden, yet there was something ancient in it, something that prickled the skin. The captain ordered us to keep distance, but curiosity pulled most men to the rail. We watched, listened, and let the eerie music wash over us. It wasn't frightening, not at first. If anything, it soothed us, a lullaby from something far older than mankind. But then, one of the trees shifted, not from a wave, not from wind. It moved. A thick root twisted upward, slow and deliberate like a massive hand stretching after sleep. Leaves rustled without breeze. Vines slithered across bark like living veins. The singing stopped, and the forest, whatever it truly was, seemed to listen. We did not tarry. The captain barked an order, and the helmsman steered us clear, every sailor assisting with renewed urgency. The floating mass drifted behind us as though watching us leave, and the farther away we sailed, the more the world returned to normal. The singing never resumed. We didn't speak much of it afterward. Some things are better left in silence. Some things the mind prefers to blur into half-memory. But the sea, she has many voices. Storms, silence, creatures of light, forests adrift in endless water. And sometimes, if you listen closely on a quiet night like this, you can almost hear her whispering those old songs again. Yet for all the mysteries, all the strangeness, the greatest danger we ever faced wasn't from the unknown. Slide a little closer to the fire, friend. Nights like this always bring back memories, the kind that drift in slow, like mist crawling over a sleeping sea. You ever notice how, after a storm, the world becomes strangely gentle? The water still heaves and sighs beneath the hull. The ropes creak like old bones, yet there's a softness to it all. Almost like the sea herself is tired from her own fury. Well, what I'm about to tell you happened on one such night, right after one of the wildest tempests we'd ever fought through. Funny thing is, it wasn't the storm that stuck with me. No, it was what came after. The silence, the strange company, and a little lesson the ocean taught me about small, fragile things. Let me paint it for you. We had just come through 3 days of hell rain hammering the deck so hard it felt like 1,000 little fists, the mast groaning like a wounded beast, lightning tearing the sky open in white rips. Men shouted until their voices cracked. The captain cursed so much his tongue nearly tied itself in knots. But somehow, we made it. The storm died just before dusk on the 3rd day. Not gradually like storms sometimes do. Not slipping away into drizzle. It ended all at once, as if someone somewhere blew out a giant candle. One moment the winds were screaming, and the next stillness. A heavy, aching stillness. That evening the clouds pulled apart like curtains being drawn back, revealing a sky so wide and clear it almost hurt to look at. Stars spilled across it in thousands, bright and sharp, shimmering like bits of broken glass. The air smelled cleaner than I'd ever breathed in my life, like wet rope, fresh wood, and something sweet. Maybe some far-off flower blooming on a distant shore. Me and a few other hands were ordered to do what sailors always do after a storm. Fix, mend, tie, patch, swear, tighten, and sometimes pray. The deck looked like a battlefield. Coils of rope tangled everywhere, half-broken crates split open, soaking wet sails slapping weakly in the breeze. The sea was still restless, but she was calming down, the waves lifting us gently, like the rise and fall of deep, slow breathing. At some point, after hours and hours of hauling and drying and hanging and tying, the captain gave us leave to rest. I didn't go below deck, not yet. My bones were tired, but my heart wasn't done with the night. After you've been tossed around by waves tall as houses, you crave the open air. You want to see the stars with your own eyes to make sure the world is still there, steady and real. So I stayed on deck. Just me, the sea, and that vast, glittering sky. It was then that I saw it, something small near my boot. At first I thought it was a soaked piece of rag or a dead fish washed aboard. But then it moved, weakly, just a little twitch, as if begging me to notice. I lifted the lantern hanging on a nail and crouched low, and there, lying on the planks like a drenched scrap of silk, was a tiny bird, a storm petrel, no bigger than my palm, feathers plastered to its body, wings trembling from cold, barely breathing. How it survived being thrown onto our ship by the storm god only knows. Now let me tell you something about sailors. We act rough, talk rough, smell rough, and probably look rough too. But deep down, many of us have soft spots. It's hard not to when you spend your life fighting the sea. When you see how powerful she is, you learn to treasure anything small that survives her moods. So I gently scooped the little creature into my hands. It didn't even struggle, just nestled weakly against my thumb, too tired to care if I was friend or foe. Its tiny heartbeat fluttered like a frightened drum inside its chest. "Easy now," I whispered, though of course the bird understood nothing. "You're safe for the moment." I tucked it inside my shirt, close to my skin for warmth. It was like holding a trembling ember. For a long while I sat with my back against the mainmast, letting the ocean rock us. I don't know how long minutes, maybe an hour. The ship was quiet except for the steady splash of waves against the hull and the occasional creak of timbers settling after the storm. Most men were below, snoring or patching their wounds or quietly thanking any god who'd listen. Eventually the little bird stirred. Slowly, gently, it pushed its head out from my shirt. Its eyes, which had been dull before, now reflected the lantern light's small dark beads of life returning. I lifted my hand and it hopped onto my fingers, still shivering but stronger than before. We sat like that, me and that bird, under the wide dome of stars. You might laugh, friend, but I swear, in that moment it felt like the ocean herself was watching us, like she was saying, "See, not everything I take stays lost. Sometimes I give things back." When the wind shifted and grew warmer, the bird lifted its wings and tested them. A small shake, a flutter, another shake. It chirped once, a soft, hesitant sound. Then it hopped off my hand, onto the railing, and turned to look at me one last time. And before I could say anything, before I could even stand it, spread its wings and took off into the night, a tiny shadow gliding into all that starlight. I sat there for a while after that, staring at the empty space where it had perched, and I felt lighter. You see, storms at sea teach you many things. How fragile life is, how cruel the world can be, how small we all are compared to the roaring dark. But that night taught me something different, that even in the middle of all that chaos, the world still makes room for small miracles, for fragile things that refuse to die, for tiny lives that survive the impossible. And I think that's why sailors never truly lose hope, no matter how violent the waters become, because we've all seen something like that, some little moment after the storm that reminds us the sea is not just destruction. She's full of mercy too when she chooses to be. So whenever you think life's tossing you around more than you can handle, remember that small bird shivering on a soaked wooden deck in the middle of nowhere. Remember how it found warmth and rest, and then the strength to fly again. If something that delicate can make it, so can you. Aye, you're still awake. Good. Nights like this are meant for long stories. Go on then, settle in, pull your cloak a little tighter, and listen. What I'm about to tell you happened years after the storm with the little bird, but somehow it feels connected, as if the sea threads all these memories together with her own invisible rope. This tale took place far from where most Western sailors ever roam, beyond the edges of the maps we were used to, out in the wide blue waters many call the Eastern Sea. Smooth currents, strange fish, skies so clear they look like polished glass. You'd think it'd be peaceful, but the truth? The sea out there is quiet in a way that feels alive, like it's watching, listening, waiting. And that's where the story of the Whispering Lanterns begins. We were on a merchant vessel by then, not a warship or exploration craft. She was a sturdy ship, wide-bellied and dependable, stuffed with spice crates, silk bundles and jars sealed with wax. The kind of ship that smells like cinnamon, dust, old rope, and the sweat of men who haven't been home in months. Not a glamorous life, but a steady one, and steady is what a sailor learns to love. Our captain, old Harron, had sails for lungs. His voice carried twice as far as the wind did. He'd sailed the eastern routes for decades, and even though he complained every morning about newfangled lads who can't tie a decent knot, he trusted us well enough. That evening, as the sun melted into the water like a coin sinking in a well, I took the second watch. Second watch is a quiet one. The first watch gets all the business of settling the night crew and checking the rigging. third watch has to deal with the coldest winds and the tiredness that creeps up right before dawn. But second watch, that's the watch for dreamers, for staring at the stars and letting your thoughts wander. I liked that watch. It suited me. The sea that night was smoother than silk. Not a ripple, not a sigh, as if the whole world had fallen asleep. The stars above were bright, but there was something else too, something faint at first. A soft, pale glow just on the edge of the horizon. At first I thought it was moonlight reflecting off a cloud bank, but the moon wasn't up yet, and the glow was too steady, too warm. Then Harren joined me on deck, rubbing his beard. "You see them?" he asked without preamble. I frowned. "See what?" He pointed to the faint light far away. "The lanterns." I raised an eyebrow. "Lanterns? Out here?" "Aye," he said in a low voice. "Though they ain't ones lit by human hands. Now you should know old sailors love their stories. They'll convince you squid can swallow ships, or that tides obey the moods of sea spirits. So I figured this was just another tale meant to spook the newer lads. But the light grew brighter and closer, and soon it wasn't one light. It was many. Dozens, no, hundreds of glowing orbs rose slowly from the sea's surface, drifting upward like tiny suns, soft green and pale blue, shimmering like lanterns made of moonfire. They didn't flicker like real flames do. They glowed steadily, calmly, as if breathing light. "What in God's name are they?" I whispered. Harren sighed softly. "No one knows. Sailors call them ghost lanterns, or the sea's lamps, or just the whispering lanterns. Some say they're spirits of drowned sailors. Others claim they're creatures from deep trenches coming up to dance in the air. Some say they're just lights, nothing more. And you? What do you think they are?" He gave me a sideways look. "I think they're beautiful, and I think when the sea gives you something beautiful, you keep quiet and accept the gift." I didn't argue. The lights had reached our ship by then. They floated just above the surface at first spheres the size of apples, glowing softly with colours I'd never seen on land. They drifted near the hull, rising and falling with the gentlest of motions. And then they began to whisper. Yes, whisper. Not with words, but with a sound like wind moving through reeds. A soft, distant hum like a lullaby hummed by someone sitting far away. You felt the sound more than heard it, a faint vibration in your chest, a softness in the air, like drifting off to sleep. The other men came up from below deck, one by one, drawn by the strange glow. No one spoke. Even the roughest, loudest sailor grew silent the moment the lights reached us. It was as if the whole crew had collectively forgotten how to breathe, and the lanterns, they rose, slowly, gracefully, drifting upward like souls freed from the weight of the world. Some brushed gently against the sails, leaving faint trails of colour behind, like the marks of fireflies dragged across a night sky. Others circled around us, weaving patterns I swear were deliberate. The whole ship glowed faintly, bathed in ghostly blue light, as if we'd slipped out of the waking world and into some dream the sea had imagined. At one point, a lantern settled near me, hovering at eye level. I reached out a hand, moving slowly so as not to frighten it, though who knows if such things even feel fear. The orb drifted closer until it nearly touched my fingertips. It felt warm, not hot, not cold, just warm, comforting. And when I touched it, it didn't burst or shatter, it simply drifted upward, leaving a tiny spark behind on my skin. I still remember that feeling, like a memory slipping into your heart, like something long forgotten suddenly returning. After what felt like hours or maybe minutes, time behaved strangely around those lights. The lanterns began drifting away, rising higher and higher, until they became little stars themselves, swallowed by the night. The hum faded, the glow dimmed, and eventually the sea was dark again. Normal again. The men finally breathed. Some crossed themselves. Some cried quietly. Others just stared at the horizon, trying to hold on to the magic before it disappeared completely. Harren clapped a hand on my shoulder. "Now you've seen something worth remembering," he said simply. And he was right. The whispering lanterns never returned, not on any voyage I took afterward. But the memory stayed, and sometimes, when the sea is still and the stars line up just right, I find myself looking toward the horizon, hoping for that glow. Strange, isn't it? How the sea can be cruel one day, kind the next, and then sometimes mysterious beyond all reason. But that's her nature, and that's why we keep sailing her. Aye, you're still with me. Good. This part of the tale is a little heavier, but no less wondrous, and it ties into everything I've been telling you, the storms, the small miracles, the strange lights that drift across the water like dreams. Because the sea, she doesn't give you only beauty. Sometimes she gives you truths, hard ones, quiet ones, the sort that sink deep, deeper than the anchors we drop into her belly. Let me take you now to a night that still sits in my bones, a night when it felt as if the sky itself reached down to touch the ocean. We were far from home, always far from home in those days. The air was warm, thick with distant scents of blooming islands we never quite reached. The sky above was so clear it looked scrubbed clean, as if the world were being polished for something grand. We were carrying grain that journey, loads of it, packed into burlap sacks that took up nearly half the hold. It was steady work, dull work, no silk, no spice, none of that fine stuff, but steady. Captain Harron was happy with steady. So were we. A man who spends half his life gripping wet timber and fighting for breath learns to appreciate plain, safe cargo more than glittering treasures. We'd had a quiet day, no strange lights, no monstrous waves, no omens of any kind. Just the slow, gentle rocking of a contented ocean. When night came, the sea turned to glass. Truly. You could see your own reflection on the surface, as clear as if you were looking into a mirror. With every ripple, our shadows wavered and stretched like long ghosts. It made the water look deep beyond measure, like a doorway into another world. I took first watch that night. Usually I hated first watch too early. Too many men still awake. Too much noise. But that night the ship seemed hushed, as if the lanterns and ropes and planks themselves sensed something in the air. I remember leaning over the railing, staring into the water, listening to the soft slap of the waves, when I heard footsteps behind me. It was Rowan, the youngest sailor on the ship, barely more than a boy. Red hair, freckles, hands full of old scars from rope burns. A good lad. Nervous around storms, but with a heart big enough to make up for it. He held a small blanket over his shoulders like a cape. "Can't sleep?" I asked. He shook his head. "Feels too quiet, sir." "Quiet's good," I said. "Quiet means no waves trying to kill us." But Rowan didn't laugh. He just stared at the water beside me. "It feels like it's waiting," he murmured. I was about to tease him for thinking too much, when the first star fell. It streaked across the sky in a long arc of silver, bright enough to paint the deck in pale light. Then another, and another. Soon the sky was alive with falling stars, hundreds of them, slicing through the darkness like white fire. Men poured onto the deck, some shouting in awe, others whispering prayers, and one or two crying because they thought the world was ending. Captain Harron stood near the helm, arms crossed, staring upward with eyes that glimmered like polished stone. And then it happened. One of the stars didn't burn up, didn't fade. It fell lower and lower, trailing a tail of shimmering sparks, and struck the ocean not 50 paces from our ship. But instead of vanishing into the waves, it floated. A glowing sphere hovered just above the water's surface, white gold, bright but soft on the eyes. The sea around it rippled gently as if welcoming whatever it was. The sphere pulsed, once, twice, like a heartbeat. Then more began to fall, not crashing, but descending slowly, gracefully, settling upon the dark water like lanterns gently placed in a river. They didn't hiss or sputter, they didn't burn the surface, they simply floated, glowing like small moons, spreading out in all directions. Rowan clutched my sleeve. "Sir, are we dreaming?" "No," I whispered, "but it feels like it." Dozens, hundreds of glowing orbs lit up the water. They drifted with the currents, creating a vast weaving pattern of light that stretched out farther than our lanterns could reach. The entire sea became a sky. Above us the stars rained, below us they glowed. It was as if the heavens had opened and spilled their jewels across the world. Men fell silent, truly silent, not a breath, not a word. Even the waves seemed to hush. Then, one of the lights drifting near the ship floated up, just like the whispering lanterns I told you about before. But these were different. Not soft blue or pale green. These burned white at the centre, with faint gold around the edges, like a sun trapped in glass. The one nearest us rose slowly, hovering at head height. It pulsed again, and when it pulsed, I swear the air thrummed with it. Like distant music we could almost hear. Rowan reached toward it. I grabbed his wrist. "Don't," I murmured. "Why not?" "Because we don't know what it is." Rowan's voice shook. "What if it's gentle?" And as if answering him, the orb drifted closer. It bathed his face in soft light, making him look younger, almost angelic. He blinked, raised a hand, and slowly touched the surface. Instead of bursting, it brightened. The light swelled around him, glowing so intensely I had to shield my eyes. Rowan let out a faint gasp, not one of pain, but of wonder. He stood suspended in that holy glow for a moment, bathed in something I still cannot describe. Then the orb rose higher and drifted away. Rowan stood completely still, staring after it. "What did it feel like?" I asked softly. He swallowed. "Warm," he whispered. Like it knew me." I didn't know what that meant. Still don't. But I believed him. After a few minutes, the glowing spheres began to rise from the sea, slowly drifting upward, lifting off the surface until they joined the falling stars above. And then, as quickly as it had begun, it ended. The sky emptied, the lights vanished, the sea returned to black. All that remained was the memory, and Rowan, who didn't speak for an hour afterward. Not because he was afraid, but because something inside him had changed. Later that night, when the crew had gone below and the deck had quieted, Rowan returned to my side. The sea was calm again, the moon finally rising. "Sir," he said softly, "why do you think they came?" I looked out across the water, feeling small. Maybe the sea wanted to show us something. Show us what? That there's more to this world than storms and salt and hunger, I said. That sometimes even the heavens come down to meet the water. Rowan nodded slowly, like he understood something I couldn't. And that night, when he finally slept, he did so with a smile on his face. A rare thing for a sailor, rarer still for a boy who spent his life battling the waves. As for me, I've spent years trying to make sense of what we saw. Some say it was magic. Others say it was a strange kind of fire or drifting creatures from deep beneath the waves. But me, I think some nights belong not to answers, but to wonder. Some nights remind us that the sea is older than our fears, and the sky older still. And if the stars ever choose to fall again, I hope you're there beside me to see it. Ah, you're still awake. Or maybe you're drifting somewhere between waking and dreaming, that soft place where the mind wanders, but the body rests. Good. This next part of the tale fits best in that quiet space. It's slower, gentler, and strange in a peaceful sort of way. Strange the way fog is strange, soft, harmless, but hiding the whole world underneath. This happened not long after the night the stars fell into the sea. The crew was still buzzing about it, some claiming it was a sign of good fortune, others saying it was an omen for storms. Sailors love omens. Give a man a strange light or an odd wind, and he'll make a prophecy out of it. But Captain Harron? He didn't say much. He'd seen enough in his years to know that the sea keeps her own secrets, and she shares them for her own reasons. We were headed toward a chain of islands known for their shallow tides places, where the sea pulls back for miles when the moon grows full, leaving behind marshlands glistening like silver cloth. The locals call them the tidelands, beautiful by day, mysterious by dusk, and dangerous at night. It was late evening when we anchored offshore. The sky was clear, turning from gold to purple, and the tide had pulled back so far that the island seemed to swell in size. Long stretches of sand and seagrass shimmered under the fading light. Tall poles stuck out of the ground markers left by fishermen to track the water's rise. The men were restless. They always were when land was in sight after weeks at sea. Captain Harron allowed a small landing party to go ashore for fresh water and driftwood. I was among them. Not because I wanted to stretch my legs, but because I trusted myself more than some of the younger lads to keep trouble away. Rowan came too, of course, still glowing from the night of the falling stars. He'd grown quieter since then. Not sad, just thoughtful. Like he was carrying a secret that wasn't entirely his. We rowed across calm waters, the oars slicing through the surface with barely a whisper. When the boat scraped the wet sand, the air smelled of salt, moss, and something sweet like flowers hiding beneath the marsh. "Feels eerie," one of the men muttered. "Aye," said another, "but look at it. Like a meadow made of silver." It did look like that. The tide had pulled back so far that pools of water lay scattered like mirrors. Small fish wriggled in the shallows. Crabs scuttled sideways, leaving tiny patterns in the sand. Everything sparkled with the last light of the sun. We split into pairs, some gathering driftwood, others searching for freshwater springs. Rowan and I walked farther inland, following the tall markers carved with strange symbols. They weren't letters I recognised, not sailor markings. Older, maybe local, maybe ancient. Rowan paused beside one, brushing his fingers along the carved lines. "What do you think it means?" he asked. "Probably a warning," I said. He chuckled nervously. "Great. I love warnings written in languages no one can read." We walked until the sand turned into soft mud. Strange plants grew there, their long leaves curling like fingers. Birds we didn't recognise croaked in the distance, low, deep sounds that echoed across the flats. Everything felt too big, too open, too quiet. Then we saw him. At first, I thought he was a tree stump, just a dark shape sitting near one of the larger tide pools. But as we stepped closer, the shape moved and stood. He was an old man, barefoot, wrapped in a long faded robe the colour of wet sand. His beard was white and tangled, reaching almost to his waist. His skin looked weathered like driftwood carved by decades of wind and salt, and his eyes were strange, pale, almost silver, like moonlight on water. He watched us with a calm expression, not startled at all. Rowan froze. "Sir?" I raised a hand. "Easy." The old man lifted one finger, not pointing at us but toward the ground. Then he traced a circle in the air, slow and deliberate. We didn't understand, but the ground did. A rumble passed through the mud beneath our feet. Soft, rolling, like a long-held breath being released. The pool beside us rippled even though the wind was still. Bubbles rose to the surface, big ones, slow ones breaking the water with soft pops. Rowan stepped back. "What's happening?" The old man spoke. His voice was gentle but rough around the edges, like stones smoothed by the tide. "The sea returns quickly to places where she lingers," he said. His accent was strange, coastal perhaps, but older than any dialect I knew. Each word sounded like it carried weight, like it had been spoken many times across many years. I swallowed. "The tide's coming back," he nodded once. "When the moon rises fully," he said, "the water leaps, not crawls. You should leave." Rowan glanced at the horizon. The moon was already rising round, white, touched with gold. But we'd seen tides before. None had ever leapt. "Thank you," I told the old man. "We'll warn the others." He studied us quietly. Then his gaze settled on Rowan for a long moment. Not threatening, not judging, just watching. "You carry a light," the old man murmured. Rowan blinked. "A what?" "A light that is not of the sky, nor of the sea." I felt Rowan stiffen beside me. The old man continued. "It touched you, and it stayed." Rowan looked down at his hands as if expecting them to glow. "I don't understand." "You will," the old man said softly, "but not today." Before we could ask more, the first surge of water appeared at the far edge of the flats, a long, dark line racing toward us faster than any tide I had ever seen. It wasn't a gentle rising. It was a wall, low but powerful, rolling across the sand with frightening speed. "Run," the old man said. We obeyed. Mud sucked at our boots. Water splashed at our legs. We shouted to the other men, gathering them quickly as the sea charged across the flats with a roar like distant thunder. The boat rocked violently when we leapt into it, pushing off just in time as the wall of water crashed where we had been standing moments before. By the time we reached our ship, the tidelands were gone, completely swallowed by the sea as if they had never existed. But the old man, he stood exactly where we'd left him, the water rising to his knees, then to his waist, yet he did not move. He did not fight the tide. He simply watched the waves. And then he disappeared beneath them. Rowan stood beside me, trembling slightly. "Do you think he survived?" he asked quietly. I shook my head. "He didn't fight the sea. He accepted it." Rowan looked out over the water, his pale face reflecting the moonlight. "He knew about the light," he whispered. "How could he know?" I didn't answer, because the truth was, I didn't know either, and that unsettled me more than the rushing tide ever could. That night everything felt heavier. Not frightening, just heavy. Like the sea had shown us another piece of herself. Something old, something patient, something waiting. And Rowan. He kept staring at the moon long after the others had gone below deck, as if hoping, maybe even expecting that the old man's words would make sense if he just looked long enough.